We've just been joined by Alice Khimasia, and Alice comes from Coventry, where I am, and is also a long time home educator, been around quite a while, a strong advocate for self-directed learning. And yeah, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself a bit, Alice. Tell them a bit more than what I've said.
Hi, yes, I'm Alice. What an esteemed group of people. Nice to see you all.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, here I am in a rather dull Coventry. Um, yeah, I'm married to Krish and we've got four sons who I have been unschooling myself alongside for many years now. My eldest is 24. We took him out of school when he was 7. And he was pretty much autonomously home educated, with short spells and dips back into the school system as he wanted. Quite an interesting journey. Um, Always an engineer, that boy, and now working as an engineer. Not very surprisingly to me. So, yeah, he's got three younger brothers. My second son is nearly 23. My third is nearly 20. And then I'm still home educating my 13-year-old. So yeah, four very different boys, four very different learning journeys, which is the beauty of home education, right?
Yes, yes, and that's what we're talking about today. And I just wanted to clarify now, you would probably, if you look back, your reasons for starting home education is probably what we would have called like for a negative reason because things weren't working out at school. Am I right?
Yes, I think we were quite proactive in that we took the boys out before things hit a crisis. Um, which I'm thankful that we listened to
Mm.
our gut really
Yeah.
and took quite decisive action. But yeah, I describe it as the light going out in my son's eyes. That's what I perceived. He was a very curious, chatty little boy, always asking questions. I know lots of people listening will relate to this. Um, because he'd been in school 4 terms when I just saw his whole demeanor change. The lights kind of went out. He started to become very anxious and he just wasn't himself. Um, and he was only 7. I thought, not
Yeah.
having that, not
Yeah.
having that.
Exactly. I think I was came from a similar point of view where I was like, she's still got this many years of her school left. I don't want to be leaving this about herself for the rest of her school years. And so, it's kind of like a bit of a reaction, but it quickly turns into like where you see the positives. Like, I think Helen Lee spoke about having an aha moment. I don't know if you
Yeah.
want to elaborate a bit on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I had quite a positive vision when I took my boys out for doing something quite alternative and radically different. But I think it was quite visionary really at the time. I just wanted them to enjoy their childhood and to be
Yeah.
curious learners, and to realize that that was something that was just a part of life, that would be a lifelong journey. And I didn't see their experience of school doing that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was, I mean, yes, we took him out of school because we saw that change, but we pretty swiftly kind of forgot about that really and just got on with the business of
We can do a
enjoying
better
learning.
job. Yeah, we can do a better job than this.
And it was, a lot of fun, actually. I
Yeah.
mean, of course, it had its ups and downs and our challenges. And he and I, particularly my eldest, used to butt heads quite a lot because I had to do a lot of unlearning, of my own quite schooled mind about what learning ought to
Yeah.
look like. He had quite different ideas. And, that was part of my whole learning journey, that children do have their own ideas about how they want to learn, what they want to learn. So yeah, the aha for me was that I needed to get out of his way actually, and rather get alongside and see him actually and see what he was interested in, what he was pursuing, the questions that he was seeking to answer. So rather than imposing my own agenda, I learned to, yes, rather be a
That's
facilitator, get alongside him. And that, that's quite a process for us schooled adults. And I mean, I trained as a teacher many years ago as well. So there was a lot of unlearning involved in that journey. Um, at times quite, it's quite painful, um, quite humbling, really. But
yeah,
he fought me hard to get me out of his way. And I learned alongside him that actually the things that he was pursuing were rich, were so deep, and often took us to really interesting places, into areas that I, hadn't even really considered. So his learning objectives far exceeded anything that I could have planned for him or conceived of. It was really, really wonderful. So yeah, that was the aha, repeated aha
yeah,
for me over many years.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that that highlights something is that, I think schools are necessary because not everyone is able to educate their child themselves, or parents need to go to work, or various reasons. Schools are necessary, but by the very nature of the way they set up, with having large groups of children, they cannot really accommodate the individual needs of the child, and they cannot get out the way, because that would be a bit chaotic, I guess, if they got out the way and let the children just um, learn as they direct themselves. And I think um, the whole interesting thing for me about learning is that we have to unpack our ideas of what learning is. And this is not something that they're able to do at institutional level, because there's this idea that learning looks like a child sitting at a table with a book in front of them. And that's learning, and a person standing in front and talking at them. And that's learning. And yet, actually, for most of us, that's not how we learn. For a lot of us, it's not how we learn. And I can sit there in a room, I can look like I'm learning, but I'm inside, I'm just waiting for time to have a nap. It's and I think this is, the whole notion of learning has changed in society, the whole idea of it, because people are so married to this idea: classroom, blackboard, teacher, desks. And yet that is a very generally quite an ineffective way to learn. And that's where I feel we have to challenge society with, whenever people are commenting negatively about home education. That's we have to try to challenge that, where that idea comes from. And you've done quite a few talks and interviews and so on, haven't you, over the years? Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the things you've been involved in?
Yeah, you just made me think actually about about how learning can just be very different and how difficult it is to meet those needs in a classroom where you've got so many children
Yeah,
needing your attention. Because I one of the things I realized quite swiftly is that my son learns a lot by talking and asking lots of questions, and his learning is very discursive. And so in school, essentially he had to sit down and be quiet because
yeah,
that was necessary for the classroom to function. And so of course he had shut down because he was being told all the time to switch off, if you like, his primary means of learning. And of course, that wouldn't be the school's intention. It's not the school's intention to switch children off learning, but essentially because all children have such different needs, how is it possible to meet all those
yeah,
needs in that environment? Yeah, so having, once upon a time, it feels a very, very long time ago, having trained as a teacher, I nowadays challenge, yes, the way that we think about learning and the way we talk about learning. I mean, a lot of focus often, I think, is in educational discussion is about teaching and the quality of teaching. And actually, one of the things I've loved about home education is to become much more concerned with learning and with the learner. And even amongst my four, never mind amongst all the children in the home education community, there's just such different needs, such amazingly diverse interests and ways of engaging with learning and with resources. And of course, we're seeing, aren't we, massive shifts in technology, in the way that we learn, the way that we engage with knowledge and information. It's shifting so rapidly and radically that I feel like the experimentation actually that happens in alternative settings and in spaces outside of the mainstream is so important. It's so pioneering. It has such a lot to teach all of us about,
Yeah,
the way children learn, the way we all learn, that it's vital, really, as a breathing, dynamic space.
it is. It is. And I think when we empower our children, I don't say empower because they know how to learn already. We don't need to give them anything. If we don't interfere and we just really facilitate and be there to support them. The way I see it is like when your child is wanting to learn to walk, there's certain things you do you put in place to help them learn to walk. You might hold their hand, you might guide them with both hands, you might make sure there's nothing they can fall and hurt themselves on. There's different things you will do, but mostly they're doing the learning themselves. And home education is the way children learn. We should just be continuing with that. What do they need? What can we get out of the way? Um, where do they need a little bit of extra support or paying for something? Um, but they do know how to learn. We don't need to. But when we trust them, I think is a
Yeah.
better way of putting it. When we trust them with their own learning, um, it's you see the outcomes are very very different. Um, because you get to see their personality becomes involved in how they learn. Um, Relationship is important, how we're relating, creating that environment of trust and of love and care, and listening, as you said. Um, it's very, very different, and the pace of it is different, and you can't see what's actually happening. You don't see because there's no worksheets. Right now, I'm thinking about this, and now I'm going to think about that. There's no worksheets. It's all in here a lot of the time, so it's hard to measure. And I like the way somebody put it where they said you're not the sage on the stage, you're the guide on the side. And the idea that somebody else has all the wisdom and knowledge and they're going to put it in your head is quite a silly one, really. It works when you are ready. If I want all the wisdom from your head and I'm engaged fully in listening, fantastic. But when it's uncalled for, unasked for, it tends to end up in a bit of an information bin somewhere. And I use that analogy of the wardrobe, don't I? Where you can it's just throwing the clothes in the wardrobe instead of hanging them up neatly on the rail where you can find them. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And you did a TEDx talk, didn't you, on self-directed learning, didn't you, some years ago?
I did, yes. Do you
Yeah.
know that's nearly 10 years ago?
Is
I
it
can't
really?
believe it.
Is it
Yeah,
really?
it
We'll
was
have to find it and link to it in the chat. Actually, I'll go and have a look for it.
it was
Um,
2016, Juliet.
yeah,
Yeah, so I
yeah.
was I was thinking the other day, goodness, that's a long time ago now. But yeah, I did. And I as a child, I wasn't keen on school. There were times in my school journey where I struggled to attend school. I didn't go. The first 3 years of my schooling, I was selectively mute. And so it's quite remarkable, really, that I did a TEDx talk. And I sort of like the story because I had something to say, and sometimes, children might be struggling in all kinds of ways, but, sometimes there's some important thing that needs saying. And I felt that when I gave that TED talk. And took my courage in both hands and took the opportunity. And yeah, it still gets a lot of views, and people still say to me, oh, I saw your TEDx talk, and it inspired me, it encouraged me, and that was entirely what I wanted it to do. So if it's still doing that, then that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
I stand by what I said. It's all good stuff. So yeah, give it a
yeah,
watch if you haven't
it's
seen it.
it's it's timeless, really, isn't it? And I think that's also what Sir Ken Robinson, he speaks a lot about, just getting things out of the way, getting out of children's way. Um,
Yeah, and
because they,
trust is really key. I think it was John
yeah,
Holt, wasn't it, who said, trust children.
yeah.
Nothing could be more simple or more difficult. Difficult because we ourselves as children were taught we could not be trusted. Something like that. I might not have got it quite right, but
Oh, yeah. But
yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed John Holt's book really. So he wrote Children, How Children Learn, and he wrote How Children Fail.
Mm,
Unfortunately, you can't lend these books to people because you don't get them back, just from personal experience, just saying. Um, but he talks a lot about trusting children, and what you see also is that children uh, that he talks about how children like to be productive. So they like to see, if I do this and I do this, it creates that. If they like to see the result. It's for instance, like baking a cake, you learn something, you're rewarded by this wonderful thing at the end, and you've learned along the way. And one of the things I think that we see in the education system that's a problem is that a lot of the learning is not productive. It produces nothing except maybe this magical piece of paper at the end of it,
yeah.
that will magically get them a job in a university place or whatever. And it's such a lie, because children cannot connect, like this worksheet, with like an end result, or this whatever learning they're doing. It is not necessarily directly linked to a something they can see and feel, or even know in themselves, something they can, oh, I know that, that's amazing. It's not about mastery, about it, doing a subject well so that you've mastered it and you're now excellent at your subject. It's not about that even. And I think there's something that's really missing from the education system in that respect.
Yeah, one
Of
of the things I've loved
yeah,
about home ed is that it's real world, real life
mm,
learning that's grounded in
yeah,
real life tasks and purpose. And it's very motivating, therefore, for children. Sometimes, people will say to me sometimes, well, how do you get your children to do anything? And it makes me laugh because I'm not having to get them to do
nope,
anything. You're going with their natural flow of curiosity and the things that they're pursuing. And, I think children love um, the independence, the feeling of being competent at things. So building real life skills is so important. I'm thinking of my 13-year-old who loves to cook. My goodness, that boy can cook. But the satisfaction he has from preparing himself like a really good meal, really something really tasty, and the feeling that that gives him of confidence and of independence is just so precious. And that's just such an everyday thing, isn't it? Um, and
it
I'm
is.
thinking too of what you said, Juliet, is because knowledge isn't segmented, is it, into subject? It's this amazing web of understanding that children build that's very interdisciplinary, that knowledge flows between subject areas and across projects, and it's such a magical thing, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And certainly in our world, it's not segmented into subjects or into neat, but which means it can be quite messy and a bit chaotic
Yes.
sometimes. And therefore, it does involve what involves trust, because you're trusting
And trust is
that tricky
scary.
process. Yeah, well, it
Scary,
can be.
scary.
Yeah, it's brave. And
Because
it's brave to
sometimes,
trust yourself as a parent as well, to hold on to that gut knowledge that um, that you're making the right choices.
and I think it's easy to talk when you're sort of mostly through that journey. But I do remember many a day, please let it pay off, please let it pay off, because you were just very aware that other people are also like kind of watching you. And not that you should be bothered by that, but you are very aware, you're stepping out of something, and sometimes your friends whose children are in school and excelling in school, and you sort of feel like, oh, I don't know. I don't know if this is working, and you just really have to like hold on tight to those reins, that
Yeah,
that
yeah.
and go for the ride, like the roller coaster. Hold on tight and just
Yes, and tune back into your own why, remember why you're
yes,
doing it, and your
yeah,
own kind of purpose. And
yeah,
I mean, when we started home educating, there wasn't we didn't have social media, we didn't have this amazing way of connecting with
Yeah.
other people. That, I mean, there were email groups, weren't there, in the education otherwise letter and
Oh,
things like
yeah.
that. It sounds really old fashioned now. But there's all that pressure as well that comes from social media of comparing yourself and
Mm.
looking at what other people are doing that we didn't have. There was very much a sense of continually having to just go back to your own conviction. And I mean, it's Joy Baker Day, isn't it? I mean, to think of her back in the 50s
So 60s
doing
with
that,
no
and
community whatsoever.
no, but holding to her own conviction about what
Yeah,
was
just
right for her family,
knowing
for her
something
children.
deep in her gut that
That's
this
right.
is
Yeah,
something.
that
Yeah.
gut
Yeah.
trust.
Yeah.
It's a courageous
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And do you feel like for you, do you feel it's paid off?
Home educating.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah.
I absolutely would do it again in a heartbeat, even
Mm.
though there's been, of course, I think whatever journey you take with your children, there's going to be ups and downs and challenges, aren't there? Of course there
Yeah.
are. If your children are in school, there's going to be difficult times and bumps and anxieties, and of course, all of that. I don't want to give the impression that it's all roses and butterflies. But would I do it again in a heartbeat? Absolutely. It's such
Yeah.
a precious thing. I just think the relationships that we've enjoyed as a family, that's that time together as our children have grown, the relationships that my boys have with one another. Sometimes I think, well, there's 10 years between my eldest and youngest sons. And if my eldest had been in school, I don't think they would have much relationship really, because he would have just been off in a different world doing his own things. But the way that they interact with each other, the friendships that they have is, it's priceless. And also
Yeah.
I think the self-knowledge that they have, the self-reflection that I see in them as young adults, the way that they are exploring their pathways into work, growing in that, the way that they observe power dynamics in the world and in the
Yeah.
workplace. So many
Yeah.
things I could talk
Yeah,
about.
I think
Yeah,
the thing that
wonderful.
I find, I think the thing I sometimes find with my children, and obviously your oldest, you've had some that have attended school, but they sometimes would like to be able to compare just to satisfy themselves that actually it was good. So you can't really always have it both ways. Um, but I think for the most part, I just sort of feel like my children are probably more emotionally whole than they would have been if they'd been in the system where they may have just been damaged emotionally and mentally by what people have said, how people have behaved towards them. Because those playground politics are not um, all wonderful. The way people bang on about how socialization and how children need to be like with other children and so on. It In some cases it's extremely toxic environments that those children are in. So I'm not saying all the time, because as I said, I went to school. I had a pretty happy childhood in my school. That was a different time in a different country. I don't know what it's like for kids today, but we certainly hear many horror stories amongst children coming out of the system that make me thankful. And actually, when we moved to the UK, we were reconsidering whether we put our children into the system here. I mean, more my husband than me, but I took one look at the product and I said, well, if that's the product, I don't want to buy that. I'm not, um, I wasn't particularly impressed by what I saw being produced by the system. So um, it is an interesting thing, and there will always be gaps, I think, which is the point I want to make. There will always be gaps, but there will be gaps if your children are in school. So there's a whole bunch of things your children miss out on by being in school. As Alice describes their journey, you can hear just what kind of gaps those might be. But there will also, as home educator, there will also be gaps. Your child may not have a prom, they may not have awards night or little weekly attendance awards, who knows, whatever. What do they call it? The star of the week, or you know, they may not get that. But it's a trade-off. And for me, in terms of my relationship with my children, their relationship with each other, with the young people, is really having hope and trust in them becoming um, young people with something to contribute to society. I think that the trade-off to me is paid off, really. So, um, but you've brought such a positive, lovely voice to the conversation today, Alice, and that's what we want to celebrate. Just as on a parting note, Alice, perhaps you want to share, like, if this bill passes, with all its restrictions and requirements and that kind of thing, have you given any thought to how that would have impacted your journey, if you were home educating under a bill like the Children's Wellbeing in Schools bill?
Yeah, it's difficult, isn't it, to think how to put yourself back.
Mm.
Obviously it's a different time. And we've been very fortunate because we came into home education right on the back of Badman. The home
Mm.
educating community had just fought for that freedom, for which I'm so thankful. We've enjoyed the years that we've enjoyed in freedom, and it's been rich and wonderful. And I say that as a person. I chose home education. I see it as it was a choice that I made for a
Yeah,
more positive educational experience. But there are people now who are not necessarily choosing it, but for whom school is just not working. And yeah, it's frightening really to think that we could lose our freedoms. Freedom needs to be fought for in every generation. We know that. And so, power to home educating parents. We're a powerful body of committed people who want the best for our children. And so, yeah, I mean, I caught the end of what Fiona was saying, but let's see, we have to keep building community, building relationships, building networks, and because I feel, I think one of my fears is that people become, in the way things are now, quite isolated if their children are struggling. And so just for people to know that they're part of a bigger movement with a lot of knowledge and experience and commitment to
yeah.
protecting our educational freedom is really important and empowering, I think.
There's power in numbers as well, and so we
Mhm.
do need to stick together and keep posting about the positives and letting people know
Yes,
that this is such a positive choice. Well, thank
absolutely.
you so much,
Yeah.
Alice, for joining us this afternoon. You're welcome to linger if you want, or if you need to go, that's fine.